morning, everybody. This is Joshua, Ashley, I'm Spartak, and today we're going to be talking about Diego Rivera and the influential figure that he came to be known as. But before we begin, we're going to be passing out a brochure.
So if you guys want to take a look, yeah, it's just a brochure kind of talking about the different artworks we're going to cover, and one of his more famous ones, Man at the Crossroads, also known as Man, Controller of the Universe. So there's a little description of that in there as well. Talks a little bit about its history and kind of who was Diego Rivera.
So his full name, actually, Diego María de la Concepción Juan Nepomuceno Estanliza de la Rivera y Barrientos Acosta y Rodriguez. He was born on December 13th in 1886 and into a middle-class family. And he was renowned for his frescoes that helped jumpstart the Mexican muralist movement. So to give a bit of a backstory, at the time, Mexico, during 1910, 1920 period, Mexico was dealing with the aftermath of a bloody civil war after Porfirio Diaz resigned from presidential office after decades of being in power. And between 1910 and 1920, there was an armed struggle with factions fighting to be the ruling power. And there were even cases where presidents were assassinated or forced to resign. And Diego Rivera at that time, he incorporated Cubism in his art style. And he was greatly influenced by artists like Picasso, even though later on in 1918, he actually rejected that style and changed. After that, the newly elected president, General Alvaro Obregón, he launched a propaganda campaign which focused on national pride. And he also appointed his Secretary of Public Education, Jose Vasconcelos, to head the campaign. At that time, the general population were actually illiterate. So Jose actually, to find a solution to this problem, he used public murals to educate the masses. And that included hiring artists. So as the author, Jose Segal states, these murals needed to pay homage to the history and culture heritage of the country in order to convey a sense of cohesion. And so that's what the government did. They hired several artists, including Los Tres Grandes, the Big Three, and which consisted of Diego Rivera, Jose Clemente Orozio, and David Alfaro Siqueiros. And this was the time period where Diego produced his best work, and he marked history as both an influential and a controversial figure in the art world. And today we're going to be showing you some of his work before and after that era.
So the first piece we're going to talk about is during an era where Rivera was focused on Cubism. Yeah, Cubism. He was at the time between 1910 and 1920. He was actually in Europe, mainly Paris, and occasionally going to Spain to study art. And like Spartak said, he was really influenced by Cubism, mainly artists like Picasso and all that. This is a portrait of a Cubist sculptor. I might butcher his name, but Jacques Lipchitz. Jacques Lipchitz, got it. So this is just one of many pieces that he did for 1918, when he changed his style. Even in his era of Cubism art or European avant-garde art, he still utilized both symbols and some aspects of traditional Mexican culture. A lot of pieces he actually put in serapes, or woven blankets worn by peasants. So this piece was one of many commissions that Rivera completed for the muralist movement. This was actually one of 41 fresco panels on the Jesuit chapel, an old Jesuit chapel, for an auditorium of what was a national school of agriculture, and now I think today it's become a charter school. And the full piece with all the panels, it was supposed to represent the contrast between the evolution of nature and social revolution, such things like that. And Rivera utilized and added a lot of symbolism from both Christianity and Aztec culture, and he shows the natural growth of like plants and people from like a seed to a full flowering plant. So this piece, pretty brutal. So this is from 1930, and this was for Rivera. He wanted to reproduce the pure, what in his eyes was the pure basic image of the land of Mexico, and he reflects how he saw Mexico's history and social life. So basically this is an Aztec warrior. This is like back in the times of Spanish conquest of like Mexico or South America. So this was an Aztec warrior stabbing to death a Spanish conquistador, and actually one of the conquistador's blade, which is like right behind his feet, which was considered kind of like a symbol of like Europe's perceived like superiority over the Aztecs because they believed their weapons were better, so they were better. It's just shattered, while the Aztec is completely dominating. And this was actually one of 5 frescoes that he made portable and moved to his exhibit for the Museum of Modern Art. And then this one was actually a commission from Dwight Morrow, who was a U.S. ambassador that was dispatched by President Calvin Coolidge in 1927. Morrow actually paid for this commission out of his own money, about, I think, $12,000, I think, that amount. And Rivera at the time was actually in need of money after he married his wife. His wife at the time,
Frida Kahlo.
Frida Kahlo, and he was in need of money to pay off the house, Blue House, I think. Yeah, for his father-in-law. So he asked for this mural to be painted in the former palace of Hernan Cortes, who was a leader of the group of Spanish conquistadors that captured Mexico and dissolved the Aztec Empire. And it depicts the Spanish conquistadors forcing peasant farmers and native people, Aztec people, across a gully, a pit.
And before we move on, so Ashley she was mentioning Frida. So I don't know a nice word. I wouldn't say he was a womanizer per se, but he was. Okay, so a womanizer. He had 4 wives. Frida Kahlo was one of the more popular of the 4 wives. If any of you are familiar, it's an older movie. It came out in 2002 called Frida. It actually had Salma Hayek, Alfred Molina portrayed Diego Rivera, Jeffrey Rush, Edward Norton, a lot of popular actors, and actually Salma Hayek was nominated for an Oscar for that role. I recommend, if you're interested in that relationship or his life, there's a lot of documentaries about him as well, but that's the more popular film that you can probably find easily. So I highly encourage seeing it. It is a good movie. The director is really good as well. So just wanted to briefly mention it before we move on. So this is a flower festival. This was done in 1931. It was one of many pieces where he paid homage to indigenous people and the culture of Mexico. So as you can see throughout a lot of these, there's a common theme. He's very big into his Mexican culture. The painting depicts a scene from a flower festival that took place on Good Friday, the town of Santa Anita. And it was presented in Rivera's 1931 exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art. That's where a lot of his popular works are. And kind of want to mention too, so the reason why he was very prominent, you can see in a lot of these paintings, what a lot you see that's missing in a lot of his artwork is actually religious figures. So he was actually an atheist, and the reason why he was a very prominent Mexican painter as well, and a lot of people really were very interested in his work because it was different than many. This isn't a mural, and we'll go into more murals later. But he actually touched a lot about the culture of people, the working class. He wanted to really use his art to kind of create a picture of what people are going through or what they went through. And a lot of murals at the time really portrayed a lot of religion. So there was a lot of people that were very interested in his work, and a lot of people thought his work was controversial because he didn't really touch on that as much as many other muralists did. So this is the Frozen Assets, also done in 1931. He visited New York and was amazed and shocked at the effects of the Great Depression on people living there. So like I just said before, he uses this artwork to really touch on what's going on in the present as well, not just the past. The painting at different levels to show the superficial view and underlying darkness of the city. So you can see as you go through it, you see the industrialization of the city. You go down, you see the single man there, and then again, he really wanted to show what was going on and use his artwork to really portray that. It shows the grand architecture that are New York's buildings, and he actually did do a few murals in New York. One that, as you're going through, I didn't include it because I included it in the brochure, was the Man at the Crossroads, which actually ended up being destroyed in New York. The Rockefeller building is where it was destroyed. But he actually had his assistant go and kind of take copies of it and use his old sketches to basically redo it again in Mexico. So again, he was a very controversial painter and muralist. So this is the agrarian leader Zapata. It is dedicated to the slain revolutionary hero Emiliano Zapata, and basically was for the peasant farm workers who followed him, and that it's a copy of a detail from a larger mural that was in Mexico a few years earlier. It's one of the ones that's also in the Museum of Modern Art. That's also located in Mexico. That's where a lot of his artwork is located. And this is
in New York City.
This one was in, New York. So this one was located in New York City.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. He did a lot of artwork, and a lot of it is in Mexico, and a lot of it's in New York. There's a lot in San Francisco. There's a lot kind of all over, and I get them mixed up.
But I meant that the exhibition was in New York City and Lowell.
So personally, this one is my actual favorite one, and a lot of people too really like this one as well, but I just think the detail is really phenomenal in this one. It was a tribute to the city's manufacturing base and labor. Again, as I said before, he really, really was inspired by what was going on in the present day and really wanted to portray it. He completed the 27-panel work in just 11 months, from April 1932 to March 1933. So, these are murals. You could just see the high detail, the amount of work, the craftsmanship that goes in, and to get it done in less than a year is phenomenal to me. It's considered by many as the finest example of Mexican mural art in the United States, and the artist thought it the best work of his career. So he loved this one as well. So I felt like we really had to show that one because it is a really great work. And then this is the history of Mexico, another one that's highly regarded as one of his more popular murals. It was painted in the National Palace of Mexico. It tells his own version of the history of the country. So it kind of shows the struggle of the native people, the Aztecs and the Spanish. So we kind of touched early on the Aztec and the Spanish as well. So he used a lot of his murals to a lot of his artwork to portray that as well. It shows, with Marxist views, depicts the path that Mexico is heading. So again, we talk about the Marxist view. So he was a super controversial artist. I can't we can't really make that any clearer. That a lot of this, he was part of the Mexico Communist Party, and then he was kicked out of the Mexico Communist Party. He was supposed to do one in Russia, and then he ended up not being able to do it in Russia because they didn't like his views. So it was very, very, very controversial artist. So, but yet, even though it was controversial, I mean, everyone regards today as just one of the most prominent painters, and how much detail and what he was really trying to say for his time. So. And then that's it.
Great.